The stars were silent as the last remnants of humanity gathered in the shadow of Earth, waiting for the inevitable. Captain Alina Saren stood at the helm of the Eclipse, Earth's final warship, her hands steady on the controls as she looked out at the vastness of space. Behind her, a cacophony of voices filled the command deck, the last crew members from the shattered remnants of Earth's military, united with survivors from the dying colonies across the galaxy. They were the last hope of the human race. Yet, despite their desperation, there was something unnerving in the air, an unspoken fear that they might not survive this battle. The Tsareth Empire, a ruthless and nearly unstoppable alien force, had already decimated every major human colony. The last defense of the galaxy had been wiped out one by one, leaving Earth as the final bastion. A fragile alliance of humans, exiled warriors, and various alien species who had once called humanity's colonies home now stood together, watching helplessly as the dark expanse of space began to swallow their world. Saren clenched her jaw. The Eclipse was their final weapon, the last line of defense, but it was more than that. For her, it was a symbol of her people's determination to fight to the bitter end. She had led them this far, and she would lead them through what was likely the final confrontation. But even she couldn't escape the heavy weight of doubt that loomed over them. "Captain, we've received a transmission from the Council." A voice broke her thoughts. Lieutenant Eva Kessler, a no-nonsense officer, was at the communication console, her brow furrowed as she read the message. "Put it through," Saren ordered, taking a deep breath. The holographic projection flickered to life before her, and the solemn faces of the Earth's High Council appeared. They were a mix of political leaders, scientists, and military officers, all holding on to the last threads of hope. "Captain Saren," General Merrick's voice was grim but resolute. "You are humanity's last hope. The Xaureth are nearly upon us. They will arrive within the hour. You have our full support, but the reality is clear. This may be the end." Saren's heart tightened. She had always known the stakes, but hearing them put so plainly was another matter. Earth's fate rested on her shoulders, and she could feel the pressure bearing down on her. She nodded, keeping her voice steady. "We'll do everything we can, General. I promise you that." The hologram blinked off, and a heavy silence fell over the bridge. "Captain," Kessler said, breaking the quiet, "we've received troubling intel. There's a mole in the fleet. Someone has been leaking our strategies to the Xaureth." A chill ran down Saren's spine. A traitor within their ranks was the last thing they needed right now. She had trusted every single officer and soldier aboard the Eclipse, but that trust was now shattered. The survival of Earth was hanging by a thread, and now they had to fight not just against the Xaureth, but against one of their own. "Find them," Saren ordered, her voice hardening, "and make sure they never see the light of day again." As Kessler moved to implement the order, Saren turned back to the view of space. The Eclipse had been built for this moment. A warship designed for total annihilation, the last stand against the Xaureth. The remaining fleet was small, no more than a dozen ships, but together they could make one final push. The Xaureth had underestimated humanity before. It was time to show them just how wrong they were. But as Saren stared at the distant stars, she couldn't shake the feeling that the battle to come would be unlike any she had fought before. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about ensuring that Earth's legacy would live on, no matter the cost. As the first Xaureth ships broke through the stars, the battle for Earth began. The Xaureth fleet appeared without warning. One moment, the vast, empty void of space stretched before Earth, and the next, the sky was filled with the horrific sight of hundreds of massive warships descending upon them like locusts. Their sleek, black ships, shaped like jagged, cruel blades, cut through the darkness, casting an eerie glow from their engines as they neared the planet. For all of humanity's preparation, nothing could have prepared them for the sheer scale of the invasion. Battle stations. "Captain," Saren's voice rang out, clear and commanding. Her crew sprang into action, the hum of the Eclipse's engines a low rumble beneath their feet. Saren's knuckles turned white as she gripped the armrest of her command chair. Through the viewing ports, Earth glowed faintly blue, a world on the verge of destruction. The first wave of Saurith warships opened fire. Relentless beams of plasma shot out from the enemy ships, converging on Earth's remaining defenses. The sky above the planet erupted in a blinding flash of fire and light as humanity's last shields buckled under the overwhelming assault. The Eclipse shuddered as the first wave of plasma bolts hit, but it held firm. Saren's lips pressed into a thin line as she watched the battlefield unfold before her. Their primary objective was clear: protect Earth at all costs. But with every passing moment, that objective became more and more unlikely. "Shields holding at 60%, shouted Lieutenant Kessler from the operations console. "We're taking heavy hits, Captain." "Divert power to forward shields," Saren ordered, her voice unwavering. "Lock on to their lead ship. Prepare all weapons for immediate engagement." The battle for Earth had begun, and the Eclipse was at the heart of it. Around them, the remnants of Earth's fleet, though outnumbered, fought valiantly. The scattered ships launched counterstrikes, but their numbers dwindled with every passing second. Saren watched through the viewports as one of the smaller defense ships was torn apart by a concentrated beam for a Saurith dreadnought. "Get us in range of their flagship," Saren barked. "We need to take down their command ship." A chorus of agreement filled the air as the crew worked in perfect synchrony. The Eclipse surged forward, its massive engines roaring to life as it cut through the debris of broken ships and shattered remnants of Earth's defenses. That Saurith flagship loomed ahead, its dark form practically consuming the stars in its wake. Saren's mind raced, calculating their moves as she prepared for the most dangerous gambit yet. They had one shot, just one. If they failed here, Earth would fall, and humanity with it. The Eclipse locked onto the Saurith flagship. Saren could feel the pressure mounting as her fingers hovered over the weapon systems. Her heart pounded in her chest as she activated the weapons. All batteries, fire. The Eclipse unleashed a torrent of firepower. The weapons mounted on the warship's hull lit up, sending concentrated beams of energy at the massive Saurith ship. The enemy flagship staggered under the barrage, its shields flaring bright before partially collapsing. But Saren knew that it wouldn't be enough. Not nearly enough. "Direct hit to their shields, Captain," Kessler reported. "We've crippled them, but not enough to stop them." Saren gritted her teeth. "Full speed ahead. We need to board them." Without waiting for a response, Saren slammed her hand down on the command console, directing the ship's autopilot to close the distance. A daring assault was their only hope. If they could get close enough, they could deploy a boarding team and take out the Saurith leadership, maybe even disable their flagship entirely. As the Eclipse hurtled toward the enemy vessel, alarms blared, signaling the presence of incoming fire. Energy beams splashed against the Eclipse's shields, and the ship rocked with the impact. "Brace for impact," Saren ordered, her voice calm, but the tension in her eyes betrayed her. The next moment, a violent explosion rocked the ship. The lights flickered, and the Eclipse lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. A deep, resonant thrum vibrated through the hull as the crew fought to regain control. "Report," Saren snapped. We've lost auxiliary power, but the primary engines are still functional, Kessler replied. We're still on course. Saren exhaled sharply. They couldn't afford another mistake. They had one chance to turn the tide. Every ship, every person on board, was counting on them. Prepare boarding teams, Saren said. We're taking the fight to their doorstep. As the Eclipse neared the flagship, the human crew braced for what would be their most dangerous mission yet. But Saren's resolve never wavered. It wasn't just Earth that was at stake, it was everything. And she would be damned if she let the Xalrith have it without a fight. The Eclipse slammed into the side of the Xalrith flagship with a deafening jolt. The hull of the enemy ship groaned as the human warship's boarding pods deployed, attaching themselves to the flagship's dark, jagged surface. On board the Eclipse, the crew's faces were tense, their hands gripping weapons and control panels as they prepared to breach the alien vessel. Captain Saren stood at the forefront, her battle-hardened eyes steely with determination. She'd have fought in countless battles, but this was different. This wasn't just about strategy or firepower. This was about survival. Boarding teams, move out, Saren barked. She felt the weight of every decision on her shoulders, knowing the success or failure of this mission would decide the fate of Earth. The metal walls of the Eclipse shuddered as the airlocks hissed open, and the teams of soldiers, hand-picked for their combat prowess and unshakable loyalty, surged forward. Saren's own team, led by herself, was the first to storm out, weapons raised and ready. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the flagship's command center, neutralize the Xalrith High Command, and seize control of the ship. Inside the enemy flagship, the atmosphere was cold and oppressive. The walls pulsed with alien energy, and the dim, flickering lights revealed strange Xalrith symbols etched into the surfaces. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and Saren felt the weight of her purpose grow heavier with each step. She knew they were deep in enemy territory, and any mistake could be their last. They moved swiftly through the corridors, encountering little resistance at first. The Xalrith seemed taken off guard, but Saren knew this would change quickly. Their enemies were fierce, calculating, and relentless. As her team neared the command center, the silence that had hung in the air was shattered by the sudden shriek of an alarm. The flagship's security systems had detected the breach. "Contact," shouted Lieutenant Kessler, her voice urgent. "We've got incoming." A swarm of Xalrith soldiers emerged from hidden alcoves, armed with energy rifles and blades that glinted with lethal intent. The human soldiers raised their weapons and opened fire, but the Xalrith were fast, faster than expected. They moved with eerie precision, their insectoid forms darting in and out of the shadows. The first few humans fell, their bodies hitting the cold metal floors with sickening thuds, but the rest pressed on undeterred. Saren was at the forefront, her pulse rifle in hand, cutting through the enemy ranks with deadly accuracy. She moved with the calm precision of a seasoned warrior, her mind focused entirely on the task at hand. But even she couldn't ignore the gnawing dread in her gut. The Xalrith were adapting. They were learning. Every moment they spent fighting here meant a delay for the rest of the fleet, and Earth's defenses were faltering. "Captain, we need to move fast," shouted Kessler, ducking behind cover as a barrage of enemy fire ricocheted off the walls. "We're losing men." "I know," Saren replied tersely. "We push forward, no matter the cost." With grim determination, Saren led the charge. They fought their way through the narrow corridors, engaging in brutal, bloody combat. Every corner turned revealed new dangers, and the enemy seemed to be coming from every direction. But the human spirit burned bright. For each comrade they lost, 10 more stepped forward, unwavering in their resolve. Finally, they reached the heart of the flagship, the command center. The doors opened with a hiss, and Saren burst into the room, her team right behind her. The Tsareth High Command, a group of towering insectoid beings, stood at the center, their alien eyes narrowing as they took in the intruders. "You are fools," one of them hissed in a guttural voice. "You think you can stop us? We are the Tsareth. We are inevitable." Saren didn't hesitate. She fired. The first shot hit the closest Tsareth in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground. The others lunged forward, but the human soldiers were faster. The room became a whirlwind of gunfire and flashing blades. Saren's pulse rifle ripped through Tsareth armor like paper, each shot finding its mark. Kessler, ever the sharpshooter, took down another high-ranking officer, her steady aim unfaltering. But the leader, a monstrous Stalrith adorned in golden armor, was not so easily vanquished. He raised his hand, and a surge of dark energy erupted from his palm, sending a shockwave through the room. The human soldiers staggered, thrown off balance by the blast. Saren gritted her teeth and advanced, her eyes locked on the creature that stood between her and victory. She couldn't allow Earth to fall, not today, not ever. With a battle cry, she launched herself at the alien leader, her blade flashing in the dim light. In that moment, everything she had fought for, the lives of her crew, the future of humanity, came down to one final strike. The fight for Earth's survival wasn't just happening outside in the void of space. It was here, in the heart of the enemy's strongest bastion, and Saren would see it through to the bitter end. The eclipse trembled as Saren's blade sliced through the final Tsareth High Commander, severing its spine with a precise thrust. The rest of the alien officers lay in a heap, their once glistening armor now charred and bloodied, the walls of the command center a twisted testament to the brutal fight. But there was no time to revel in the victory. Saren's heart pounded in her chest as the cold realization set in. The battle was far from over. Status report. Saren barked, wiping her blade clean as she turned toward Kessler. "We've taken the flagship," Kessler replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion etched on her face. "But we've lost too many. The fleet's broken. We need to retreat, Captain. Earth's defenses are collapsing." Saren's mind raced. The Tsareth were relentless, and their numbers seemed endless. The eclipse had dealt a heavy blow, but Earth's orbit was no safer than it had been moments ago. Saren had to think fast. Every decision now was life or death, not just for her crew, but for the entire human race. "That's not an option," Saren replied, her voice like steel. "We hold this ground, or Earth falls." But deep down, she knew the situation was growing direr by the minute. The Tsareth would regroup, and soon their reinforcements would arrive. There had to be another way, something they hadn't considered yet. "Captain," Kessler began hesitantly, "there's something you need to know. We've intercepted a transmission, encrypted, from within our own ranks." Saren's blood ran cold. A traitor. Her thoughts immediately went to the mole Kessler had warned her about earlier. It was only a matter of time before they uncovered their identity, but this felt different. "Who?" Saren asked, trying to keep her voice controlled. I don't know," Kessler confessed, her brow furrowed in confusion. "But it's a rebellion, a faction of humans who believe we've lost already. They want to surrender to the Tsareth, Captain. They believe it's the only way to survive." Saren's gut clenched. A rebellion inside their ranks. This was more than just a few disgruntled soldiers. It was a splinter faction, an insidious movement that sought to tear apart everything humanity had fought for. "No," Saren spat, her voice full of icy resolve. "We do not surrender. We survive, or we die. There is no other choice." As Saren and Kessler discussed the troubling news, a voice broke through the air. It was unfamiliar, deep and guttural, and it sent a chill through the room. "Captain Saren, I presume." Saren's head snapped around. Standing in the doorway was a figure clad in dark, worn armor, human in appearance, but with a distinct alien quality to them. They were tall, their face obscured by a helmet, their stance almost regal. A powerful energy radiated from them, and their presence filled the room like a storm. "I am Rian Toll," the figure announced, his voice both threatening and somehow familiar. "I've come to offer you a choice." Saren's hand instinctively moved to her sidearm. "Who are you? What is this?" "I am in exile, Captain." Ryan continued, his voice calm, unwavering. "One of many who escaped the fall of our colonies. But I am not here to fight. I am here to make an offer. The rebellion within your ranks, they are not just traitors. They are the key to your survival." Saren narrowed her eyes. "What are you talking about?" Ryan stepped closer, removing his helmet with a deliberate slowness that revealed his features, human, but with unmistakable signs of being shaped by alien influence. His eyes gleamed with a strange mixture of wisdom and sorrow, a sense of knowing something beyond what anyone on board the Eclipse could comprehend. "They've been communicating with the Xalrith for months," Ryan explained, his tone almost conspiratorial. "They believe that surrendering to the Xalrith will allow them to preserve what's left of humanity. They don't see the big picture, but I do." Saren's pulse quickened, her suspicion growing. "And what's your role in all of this?" "I was once part of that faction," Ryan admitted, his gaze steady. "But I defected when I realized the truth, that Xalrith's plans for Earth go beyond what you can comprehend. They are not just invaders, they are conquerors. They intend to transform Earth into a breeding ground, a factory for their armies. You are the last obstacle in their path, Captain." Saren's mind raced as she processed his words. Everything she had known about the Xalrith was shifting in an instant. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about resisting an enemy that wanted to wipe out humanity entirely. "Then why should I trust you?" Saren asked, the distrust evident in her voice. "Because I've seen what they are capable of," Ryan said, his eyes darkening. "And because I can help you stop them. You need me, and the rebels who still believe in a fight. But it will require a choice, Captain. One that could destroy everything you've worked for, or save it." Saren's thoughts whirled. Earth was on the precipice of annihilation, and now she was faced with a choice she could never have anticipated. To trust this mysterious rebel, or to fight on their own. Either path was fraught with danger, and time was running out. She looked around at her team, at Kessler, at the soldiers who had followed her into battle. This was the moment that would define their fate. The decision could either save humanity or doom them to extinction. "Gather the council," Saren ordered, her voice hardening. "We need to make this decision together." As the door closed behind her, Saren stood alone for a moment, the weight of leadership pressing down on her like never before. The rebellion inside her own ranks was only the beginning. The galaxy's future, and humanity's place in it, now hung in the balance. The weight of the decision was almost unbearable. Captain Saren stood at the center of the war room aboard the Eclipse, her eyes scanning the faces of her officers. The atmosphere was thick with tension. No one spoke, no one moved, as if every word carried the potential to unravel their last shred of hope. Lieutenant Kessler stood at the command console, her face drawn tight with unease. "Captain," she said, her voice quiet, Are we really considering this? Trusting a deserter who's just shown up out of nowhere? We fought too hard to even entertain the idea of surrendering. Saren's gaze never wavered. She could feel the cold weight of her officer's eyes on her, waiting for her to make the call. And yet, in her mind, the stakes had never been higher. What Ryan Tall had said was not easily dismissed. That Saurith were not simply invaders, they were manipulators. They had a plan, a terrifying vision for Earth, and if Ryan's warning was true, the galaxy might not just lose its last hope, it might lose its future. There's more to this than just the Saurith attacking us, Saren replied, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. Ryan says they want Earth to become a breeding ground for their armies. That's a fate far worse than death. But if we refuse him, Kessler trailed off, her words heavy with the unspoken threat of what refusing Ryan might mean. The rebellion will grow, Captain. We have enough traitors among us already. A low murmur ran through the room, the reality of their situation sinking in. Earth's defenses were crumbling, the Saurith fleet was growing, and now the Eclipse, the last bastion of humanity, was divided. It was as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath, waiting for the human race to either collapse or rise from the ashes. What if there's a way to fight back? Saren said, her voice hardening with resolve. What if Ryan's offer isn't a surrender, but a chance to turn the tide? The rebels within our ranks are already talking to the enemy. We need to know more. Kessler shook her head. That's a dangerous gamble. If we take Ryan's side, how can we be sure we're not playing right into their hands? What if we're walking straight into a trap? We don't have the luxury of certainty anymore, Saren responded, her gaze unwavering. But we do have the luxury of a choice. And right now, it's either fight as we always have, or take a calculated risk to break the deadlock. We can't afford to lose any more time. There was a long pause, as if the entire crew was digesting her words. Then, slowly, Lieutenant Kessler nodded, the harsh lines on her face softening just slightly. Then we'll do it your way, Captain. But know this, if it goes wrong, there won't be anyone to pick up the pieces. Saren's jaw tightened. She knew the consequences. Failure now meant extinction. Turning away from her officers, Saren activated the comm system, summoning Ryan Tall to the war room. The silence stretched on for what seemed like eternity before the door slid open and Ryan strode in. The rebel leader's presence was as commanding as ever, his eyes burning with the weight of someone who knew too much, and yet held the secrets of what was to come. You've made your decision, then, Ryan said, his tone calm, almost expectant. Saren nodded. We'll listen, but there are conditions. You'll help us remove the mole in our ranks, and you'll show us exactly what the Saurith's plans for Earth really are. No more half-truths. Ryan's eyes darkened. The mole is already in place. It's not one person. It's a movement. There are far more humans who believe in the Saurith's vision than you realize. They've been working from within, trying to dismantle everything we've built. Saren bristled. Then we'll crush them. Ryan's lips curled into a knowing smile. You can try, Captain. But remember, fighting the Saurith is not just about defeating their armies. It's about understanding their tactics, their mindset. If you don't think like them, you'll never win. Saren's teeth ground together. The idea of surrendering any ground to the enemy was repugnant to her, but Ryan had a point. Their survival depended not just on fighting back, but on understanding the very nature of their foe. I want to see the evidence, Saren said, her tone biting. I want to know what we're dealing with. Ryan's gaze softened, almost sympathetically. You will, Captain. But I warn you, what you learn will change everything. Once you see the truth, you may not be able to go back to the way things were." Saren took a deep breath. "We'll do whatever it takes." As Ryan left to retrieve the information, Saren turned back to the remaining crew. The room was heavy with silence, as if everyone felt the shift in the air. The rebellion had been exposed, but so too had the reality of the Zaurith's plans. This was no longer just a war for survival. It was a war for the future of humanity itself. The next few days would be critical. They had a choice, but no certainty. As Saren looked out of the war room's viewport, she felt the weight of the coming storm. The rebellion inside their ranks, the truth about the Zaurith, they were only the beginning. What would happen next could either save Earth or destroy it once and for all. The war room buzzed with quiet intensity as Saren stood before the massive holomap of Earth's defenses, the dark expanse of space stretching beyond the borders of their fragile sanctuary. The rebels' transmission had revealed a staggering truth, that Zaurith were already in control of far more than the human race realized. Their infiltration was subtle, yet pervasive, and every day that passed brought humanity closer to total annihilation. The latest intelligence had come in. A fleet of Zaurith warships was heading directly toward Earth's primary defense grid, their arrival set for only a few days. The time for negotiation and gathering allies was rapidly running out. The eclipse, humanity's last hope, was now a symbol of both defiance and desperation. Saren's eyes scanned the map, pinpointing locations where human colonies had fallen, where ships had been wiped out by Zaurith forces, and where small pockets of resistance still held out, clinging to life. Each red dot was a lost world, each cluster of human forces a beacon of rebellion. "Captain," Kessler's voice broke through the tense silence. "Ryan's information, it's worse than we thought. The Zaurith are adapting their strategy. They'd found a way to disable our hyperdrives. Every human fleet within 100 light years is now vulnerable." Saren's hand clenched into a fist at her side. This was what she had feared. The Zaurith weren't just attacking. They were crippling humanity's ability to fight back, strategically dismantling the very tools they relied on for survival. The hyperdrive was humanity's greatest advantage, their ability to outmaneuver the enemy, to stay mobile and unpredictable. And now the Zaurith had nullified it. "Damn them," Saren muttered under her breath. "They've learned everything they need to destroy us." Ryan, now a reluctant ally, had been right about one thing. The Zaurith weren't just another enemy. They were a species that learned, that adapted, that attacked the very core of human ingenuity. They had studied Earth's tactics, exploited humanity's weaknesses, and now they were closing in on the final blow. "Is there any way to break through their defenses?" Saren asked, turning back to Kessler. Kessler hesitated before answering, her face tight with frustration. "We've got a few options, but none of them are good. We can launch a direct assault on their fleet, but without the hyperdrives, we'll be sitting ducks. We could try to break their communications network, but that would be a suicide mission. And even if we succeed, it might only delay the inevitable. We don't have the luxury of waiting for a perfect plan," Saren said, her voice cold. "We need to act now, or we'll lose everything." Saren turned to Ryan, who had been silently observing the proceedings. "You said you could help us. What's your plan?" Ryan stepped forward, his expression grim. "There's a way to turn the tide, but it involves something I didn't want to share before. The Zaurith have a weapon, a prototype, something they've been building for years. It's a device capable of disabling entire fleets, rendering them completely immobile, even without the hyperdrives. They've been testing it on isolated colonies, but they haven't used it on a large scale yet." Saren's brow furrowed. "Where is it?" Ryan's eyes flickered toward the holo-map. On a station deep within their territory, beyond the edge of their fleet, it's the heart of their operations, where they store all their experimental technology. If we can get there before they deploy the weapon, we might have a chance. Saren's heart raced. The station was situated in the Salrith's most heavily guarded sector, surrounded by an armada of warships. Getting there would be near impossible. And even if they managed to breach the defenses, there was no guarantee they could destroy the weapon in time. "We'll need a distraction," Saren said, her mind already working through the logistics. "Something big enough to pull their forces away from the station." "Leave that to me," Kessler spoke up, her voice full of determination. "I'll coordinate a decoy strike, something that'll draw their attention. We can hit them on multiple fronts. The station may be heavily guarded, but if we strike from the inside and outside, we can force them to divide their forces." Saren nodded. "And we'll need a team to infiltrate the station itself. A small, elite squad. We can't risk losing more lives than necessary." Ryan spoke again, his tone darker than before. "You'll need more than just soldiers to break in. That Salrith have traps, systems designed to catch even the most skilled infiltrators. You'll need someone who knows their systems, someone who can bypass their security from the inside." Saren's eyes met Ryan's, and in that moment the decision was made. He wasn't just a rebel leader anymore. He was their only hope. "Then you're coming with us." Ryan didn't flinch. "I've already lost everything. If you're asking me to risk my life again, I'll do it." Saren turned back to Kessler. "Prepare the fleet. We go in 2 hours." The crew scattered, each person focused on their own tasks, but Saren stood frozen for a moment longer. The weight of the mission was heavy on her shoulders. If they failed, humanity would be lost, not just to the Zalrith, but to their own mistakes. The cost of rebellion was steep, but the cost of surrender was unthinkable. And so, with a final glance at the Earth looming outside the viewport, Saren made her peace with the uncertain road ahead. The time for hesitation had passed. They were on the edge of darkness, but even in the blackest void, the light of defiance burned brighter than ever before. The eclipse cut through the void like a shadow, its engines humming steadily as it approached the heart of the Zalrith territory. The crew was tense, each member knowing that they were about to embark on a mission that could either save Earth or doom it forever. Saren stood at the command deck, her hands clasped behind her back, her mind sharp with focus. "Captain," Kessler's voice came over the comms. "We're entering the Zalrith defensive perimeter. Their fleet is closing in, but they haven't spotted us yet. We've got a brief window." Saren's heart pounded, but her exterior remained calm. She could feel the weight of every decision, the weight of every life aboard the Eclipse. Their plan was as close to madness as it got: divide their forces, strike at the heart of the enemy, and hope they could disable the Zalrith's devastating weapon in time. Time was not on their side. If the weapon was deployed, humanity would be paralyzed, unable to defend itself for the Zalrith's final assault. "Proceed with the distraction," Saren ordered. "Give them a reason to think we're attacking their outer fleet. We need them focused on the decoy strike long enough for our team to infiltrate the station. We'll hit their weak spots, just like we practiced," Kessler responded, and Saren could hear the fire in her voice. The Eclipse might have been humanity's last warship, but it was not without its weapons. A well-placed strike could make all the difference. With the plan in motion, Saren turned her attention to the team that would board the Zalrith station itself, herself, Ryan, Kessler, and a hand-picked squad of elite soldiers. Each of them knew the odds of survival were slim, but they had all signed up for this. Earth's future depended on them. In the quiet before the storm, Ryan approached Saren on the deck. His expression was unreadable, his normally confident demeanor replaced with something darker, something that felt like an acceptance of fate. "Are you ready for this?" Saren asked, her voice low. Ryan's eyes met hers, and for a moment there was a depth of emotion, regret, defiance, and a quiet understanding. He had come far from the rebellious deserter that had first approached her. Now he was an integral part of humanity's last hope. "No," he replied simply, "but that's the nature of this war. We do what we must." Saren nodded, not needing further words. They had all made their peace with the unknown. The eclipse might never see Earth again if they didn't succeed, and the fate of billions rested on their shoulders. Hours passed, and the mission moved into its critical phase. The decoy strike was a success. Explosions and fire tore through the Zalrith's outer defenses, drawing the attention of their fleet. As planned, the Zalrith diverted their resources toward containing the human assault, leaving the interior of their territory vulnerable. The eclipse positioned itself in the shadows, a mere speck against the vastness of the enemy armada. It was now or never. "Time to go," Saren said, her voice a steady command as the team donned their assault gear. The airlock doors hissed open, and Saren, Ryan, Kessler, and the soldiers stepped out into the shuttle bay. The shuttle they would use to infiltrate the station was small, cloaked in advanced stealth technology, and designed for one purpose: to get them inside without being detected. The journey to the Zalrith station took only minutes, but every second felt like a lifetime. Saren's stomach churned with a combination of fear and resolve. She wasn't afraid of dying, she was afraid of failing, of the possibility that their last gamble might be for nothing. The station loomed ahead, an immense, jagged structure of alien design. Towers of dark metal spiraled upward, seemingly alive with energy, and the whole place thrummed with a sense of waiting. The Zalrith were masters of cold precision, and their technology was like nothing humanity had ever seen. It was a fortress, a machine built not just for defense, but for destruction. "We've got one shot at this," Kessler murmured, her voice tense through the comms. "If they detect us before we get to the core, we're dead." Saren glanced at Ryan, who gave her a tight nod. He was the key to this whole operation. His knowledge of the station's layout, the Zalrith's security protocols. His defection had cost him everything, but now it made him humanity's greatest asset. The shuttle moved silently through the outer reaches of the station, bypassing automated defense grids and cloaked in the shadows of the colossal structure. They touched down with barely a sound, and the team disembarked, their boots making only the faintest noise as they stepped into the station's cold, sterile corridors. Ryan led the way, his eyes scanning every corner, every doorway. The team moved with precision, their footsteps synchronized, their bodies tense. They were all hyper-aware of the danger surrounding them. The slightest mistake could end their mission. "This way," Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible over the comms. He led them into a narrow passageway, and Saren's heart pounded in her chest. They were so close, and yet it felt like the walls of the station itself were closing in on them. At the end of the passage, a massive door loomed, unmarked, but clearly vital. Ryan turned to Saren. "This is it. We're in the heart of their operations. If we disable this station's core, the weapon goes offline. We can stop them. But if we fail..." He trailed off, the implication clear. Saren nodded, the fire in her eyes unwavering. "We won't fail." And with that, they pushed forward, deeper into the heart of the Zalrith's lair, where their fate, and humanity's, would be decided. The corridor was eerily silent. save for the quiet hiss of the team's breathing masks and the soft footsteps that echoed around them. The air felt dense with anticipation, a suffocating weight that pressed in from all sides. The heart of the station lay ahead, the core of the Salrith's operations, and the place where their fate would be decided. Ryan led the way, his face set in grim determination, his eyes flickering from one shadow to the next. They passed through a series of security checkpoints, bypassing scanners and locks with Ryan's knowledge and the squad's expertise. They were deep within the station now, close enough to hear the hum of the weapon's energy source, a sound that sent a shiver down Saren's spine. As they approached the heart of the station, the magnitude of their mission became all too real. They were about to face the weapon that could render humanity helpless, the one thing that could push Earth into a permanent subjugation under the Salrith. There was no turning back now. Failure was not an option. Saren felt her pulse quicken. She could hear the weight of each footstep, feel the tension building with every passing second. They were moments away from reaching the core, and the stakes had never been higher. They rounded a corner, and there it was, a massive spherical chamber, lined with pulsing energy conduits and glowing panels of alien technology. The Xarith weapon was positioned in the center of the room. A gleaming dark object suspended in a field of energy, its immense power already primed, ready to incapacitate the human fleet once activated. The machine seemed alive, its shape shifting with the fluctuations of energy that danced around it. Saren could feel the weight of it, the power that could wipe out humanity's remaining hope. "It's not too late to stop," Ryan said quietly, his voice laced with a quiet urgency. "We could still escape, get the data back to the fleet. They'll come for us." Saren's eyes narrowed, her jaw set in resolve. "We didn't come this far to turn back. This ends now." Kessler stepped forward, her weapon held tightly in her hand. "We take out the core and the weapon goes offline. We've been planning this for months. If we don't stop it here, everything we fought for will be lost." The team spread out, forming a defensive perimeter around the central chamber. They had only moments before the Salrith detected their presence and descended upon them. The air was thick with tension, each movement a calculated risk, each second a countdown to their inevitable confrontation. "Ready?" Saren asked, her voice low but clear. The team nodded, their weapons poised and their focus unshakable. They had all come here to face the enemy, to give everything to stop the Xalrith. For Earth. For humanity. Ryan approached the weapon's core, his fingers moving quickly over the alien panels, inputting a series of commands that would disrupt the station's energy grid. As he worked, Saren kept a sharp eye on the corridor behind them. Knowing they wouldn't have long before reinforcements arrived, they had to disable the weapon and escape before they were overwhelmed. "Come on, Ryan," Kessler muttered, her finger itching on the trigger of her weapon. "We don't have much time." A soft beep echoed through the chamber, and then the hum of the weapon began to shift, growing louder, more erratic. Ryan stepped back quickly, his face pale but resolute. "It's done. The weapon is offline," he said, his voice tight. For a moment, it seemed too easy, too quick. The core was silent now, its pulse of energy fading away into nothingness. Saren felt a fleeting sense of triumph, until the sound of approaching footsteps shattered the quiet. "They're here," Kessler hissed, her eyes darting to the door they had entered. "We've been detected." The squad took their positions, weapons raised, ready for the fight. The door slid open with a deafening hiss, and a group of Salrith soldiers, their alien forms towering and armoured, poured into the chamber. Their glowing eyes fixed on the humans with an intensity that was chilling, their weapons humming with energy. Saren's heart pounded. This was it, the final stand. She signaled her team, and the room erupted in chaos as the humans and Sareth clashed. Blaster fire lit up the room, and the metallic screech of energy shields rigging out in violent bursts filled the air. Kessler fired first, a burst of energy taking down one of the Sareth soldiers, but there were too many. Saren's pulse raced as she fired at another alien, her shots landing with deadly precision, but their numbers were overwhelming. They were surrounded. The team was outnumbered. "We're not done yet," Saren shouted, her voice cutting through the noise of battle. "Ryan, get to the backup control panel. Shut down the station." Ryan nodded grimly and turned to sprint toward a nearby console, but before he could get far, one of the Sareth soldiers lunged at him, slamming him to the ground. Saren's breath caught in her throat. "No!" she shouted, rushing forward, but Kessler grabbed her arm. "Let him go. He's got this," Kessler said through gritted teeth. "We hold them off." Ryan, struggling but relentless, managed to activate the shutdown sequence. The energy surging through the station began to flicker and fade. With a final decisive movement, the weapon powering the Sareth forces shut down completely. The Sareth soldiers faltered, their weapons sputtering and sparking. The tide of the battle began to shift in humanity's favor. The team pushed forward, fighting with everything they had, and as the last of the Sareth fell, Saren stood over them, panting, bloodied, but triumphant. The mission had succeeded, the weapon was destroyed, and Earth was safe. But the cost was steep. Many of them would never see home again. Saren looked at Ryan, who had collapsed against the control panel, breathing heavily. "Earth is safe," he said with a small, exhausted smile. "For now." Saren nodded, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "For now." As the lights flickered and the sounds of the station's power began to fade into the silence of the void, Saren knew one thing above all else. They had won. But the war was far from over. The fight for humanity's future had only just begun.